Welcome back. Bear with me, I've lost my voice, so this will be a bit of a struggle, but I couldn't help myself. I have a What Do You Mean AusPol weekly roundup for you. I have a collection of Australian politicians saying horrible stuff and telling us about their horrible policies. Let's get to it.
The Labor Party will oppose this bill. And frankly, I'm pretty disgusted with them because in the last month alone, we've had 2 cases of men in the detention centres using their mobile phones to distribute disgraceful child exploitation materials. You know, hundreds and thousands of images which they're using their mobile phone for to distribute. The Australian Border Force officers in those detention facilities know that they're doing this but don't have the ability to seize their mobile phones from.
Alan. Pretty sure it's already a crime to have that sort of stuff. I don't really think you need to take everybody's phone away from them. Are you sure that's not to stop them showing us what it's like in Australian detention centres? Are you sure this isn't more like covering Border Force's arse, and so less people know that we're detaining families and young children for the crime of trying to make Australia their home? Because yeah, what those 2 men did is already a crime, bro. On to the next one.
Coronavirus restrictions have caused Australia's greenhouse gas emissions to plummet to their lowest level since 1998. Energy Minister Angus Taylor says while it's welcome news, the restrictions are unsustainable.
It's expected but not sustainable. We want to see a strong economy alongside falling emissions, and that's exactly what we'd seen pre-COVID.
The federal government says it will focus on a gas-led recovery.
Oh, I've got a few things to say about this. Oh, Angus. Well, first of all, the coronavirus restrictions weren't put in to lower emissions. They were put in to save people's lives. And so with lockdowns and people not being able to go to work because we're trying to stop the spread of a deadly virus, that has then caused emissions to go down. I really feel like our energy minister doesn't know this. And our Gasled Recovery. Oh, I have a few things to say about our Gasled Recovery. Let me show you something. Labor says it wants to stop Coalition turning Greenbank into fossil fuel slush fund. The opposition will try to amend the government's plan to allow Clean Energy Finance Corporation to invest in gas-fired power. This is from the 1st of September 2020. Labor says it will vote against a proposal from the Morrison government to open up the taxpayer-owned Greenbank to fossil fuel investment if its planned amendments fail. As part of its much-vaunted gas-led recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and its initiative to establish a fund to invest in grid reliability, the government wants to redefine gas-fired power as low-emissions technology. The aim is to enable the Clean Energy Finance Corporation to make investments in grid infrastructure. The Labor caucus on Tuesday signed off on 3 amendments to the proposal, with the first rejecting the proposed definition of gas. The second amendment would remove a non-disallowable ministerial power permitting the Energy Minister to advise the CEFC to look at investing in particular technologies. The third amendment would remove a proposal from the government that investments made through the Grid Reliability Fund do not have to generate a rate of return. Currently, the CEFC investments do have to generate a rate of return. So yeah, by trying to pull us out of the crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, they want to just plunge us headfirst further into the climate change crisis.
Bring forward the personal tax
skills. That is one issue that we're considering because we did legislate the tax cuts after the last election. They were in 3 stages, and more money into people's pockets means more spending, and more spending means more jobs.
But you've got to give them the confidence. You've got to give them the confidence to spend.
We absolutely need to do, and the best way to do that is to ease the restrictions. That's why what happens in Victoria is so critical to the state's recovery, but also to the national recovery, because it goes right to that issue of confidence. And if businesses can see a roadmap out, then they can take the decisions to hire more people, they can take the decisions to invest in growing their business.
Oh, Josh, you're going to have to show you're working out on this one, mate. How is relieving restrictions going to build confidence? The woman conducting this interview is right. You need to build confidence. And it is not by relieving restrictions while the virus is running rampant. The way to make people more confident is by getting the virus under control. Like, even if you do put a little bit of money back in the pockets of Australians, if the pandemic is still in full swing, we're going to spend that online, pay off our debts and buy groceries. If you want to bring back the jobs, like you would have people spending money at bowling alleys and movie theatres and restaurants, if you want the waiters and the people that work in those businesses to come back, you need to stop the spread. And as for these tax cuts, these planned tax cuts, let's just have a little look, shall we? So this is the planned changes to the Australian income tax. They're taking the 32.5% bracket, which goes from 37k to 87k, and the 37% bracket, which goes from 87k to 180k. Getting rid of them two and replacing it with a 30% bracket, which goes from 45k to 200k, which means the lowest tax bracket has its threshold lifted to 45k. That's how they're looking like they're helping out the little guy. But while doing this, the largest tax bracket is also risen to 200k from 180k. But this is what they plan to do, as you can see, by 2024 and 25. So the way they want to help us out is by moving this forwards. Now, I'd like to bring your attention to some other tax cuts. These are the changes to the corporate tax rate. Now, back in 2017-18, they made the threshold go from 25 million to 50 million, and that's when they started dropping the percentage from 27.5% by 2024. They want it down to 27%, and then 2025, 26%, and 2026, 27, 25%, which is a smaller percentage than what they want majority of Australians to pay in income tax. Oh, and you just know they're going to turn around and say that the JobKeeper and JobSeeker payments have done so much to the debt, we're in big trouble. So what logical treasurer will then turn around and cut the revenue? Hear me now and quote me later. If that's what they plan to do, that's what they're going to say. On to the next one.
Well, I think it shows you that closing the borders is not cost-free. I mean, it's costing people livelihoods, it's costing people businesses, particularly in Queensland, which is so tourism dependent. Australians aren't able to visit Queensland, people aren't able to visit their family there. Of course, that's going to have an impact. And look, you've seen with this outbreak in the Queensland Youth Detention Centre and at a shopping centre in Indooroopilly, the fact that Queensland's borders have closed does not mean that the virus has been eliminated. And I think, we all need to get used to the idea that this virus will continue to be present in our lives, and we need to take steps to lower the risk and mitigate the damage that it causes. But, normal life does need to resume as well, and normal economic activity, and opening the internal borders within Australia, even whilst our external borders remain restricted, would be a massive boost to economic activity.
But
Oh, Dave, you said it yourself. Even with the borders closed, Queensland still had outbreaks. So why would you want to open up the borders? That just screams chucking fuel on the fire, like you want to make things worse. I'm so sick and tired of these dickheads and their whole "the economy is more important than people's lives" bullshit. Now, Dave, remember this tweet from back in June when you wrote, "It took the creation of standardised passports at the League of Nations diplomatic conference in 1920 for international travel to get back to normal after World War I and the Spanish flu pandemic. What will it take this time around?" Remember that? Do you remember how I replied to you with this? Your recent investments. Picked yourself up some shares in Qantas and Sydney Airport. So I see why you kind of wanted international travel to get back up and running. From what I can tell, you still have the same shares, so that's probably why you want these airports and airlines to work again, want to open up them borders. And it might just be me, but my insider trader senses are tingling, and I think we should keep an eye on this CSL Limited, being a pandemic and all. Oh, and speaking of the economy being more important than people's lives.
In this climate of fear, it was hard for governments to ask how much is a life worth, because every life is precious and every death is sad. But that's never stopped families sometimes electing to make elderly relatives as comfortable as possible while nature takes its course. And likewise, people anticipating serious long-term health problems sometimes elect not to be resuscitated. With Sweden the most notable exception, governments have approached the pandemic like trauma doctors, instead of thinking like health economists trained to pose uncomfortable questions about a level of deaths we might have to live with. And even if mandatory shutdown really was all that avoided the initially predicted 150,000 deaths, that still works out at about $2 million per life saved. And if the average age of those who would have died is 80, even with roughly 10 years of expected life left, that's still $200,000 per quality life year, or substantially beyond what governments are usually prepared to pay for life-saving drugs.
Disgusting. This pro-life, onion-eating former Prime Minister of Australia sat down with a calculator and worked out how much money we would save if we just let Grandma die from COVID. What a piece of shit. I gotta say, the only good thing that came out of this piece of shit saying this publicly was when I put it on TikTok and there was comments from all different kinds of Australians telling him to piss off to America and calling him a dingus and be like, of course he doesn't care about my grandma, and then pointing out his hypocrisy with his pro-life stance and all that. Made me very proud to be Australian, because when someone says something fucking ridiculous, we all unite to go fuck off. And speaking of saying something ridiculous, opening up borders and sacrificing grandma to COVID, wrap your eyes around this and I knew it was going to be fun to read this out loud. So, we agreed today, 7 out of 8 states and territories. We agreed that before you know what you're going to do, you've got to agree about where you want to get to. And we agreed today that the objective that was set out in the May plan to be at the end of that step 3 process, which we will seek to ensure even better defined. We said before we wanted to get there in July, and the virus prevented us from achieving that. 7 out of 8 states and territories want us to get back to that position in December of this year. And I thank them for that commitment, and that having that ambition is not enough, and that aspiration that we'll now fashion a revised plan just like I outlined the last one to get us there over these months that are ahead. Yeah, alright Morrison. The current Prime Minister of Australia, everybody. And I don't even think he's doing a Trump impersonation. And which one out of the 8 states and territories is like, nah, I'm pretty sure it's WA. Pretty sure WA is the ones that are smart enough to be like, nah, we don't want any Christmas COVID. Are you fucking serious? And we'll wrap it up here. Just a reminder that all of those politicians are from Australia's right-wing party that is currently in power, called the Liberals. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe.